How much water would you have to drink to die? Which mathematician was the leader of an extreme religious cult that forbade its members from talking or eating beans? How did an episode of Friends create one of the most widely believed medical myths? The answers to these questions and hundreds more can be found in my new book, Facts That Aren't True. Link in the description.
Accumulation of sediment between two instants of time, T1 and T2, produced a deposit. The deposit consisted of a part of the lower laminae, part of the stratum of large particles, and part of the upper laminae. Each subsequent individual deposit from upstream to downstream was therefore younger than the one before it. Due to the presence of a current, strata were formed vertically and laterally at the same time.
Hit pause right there, Donnie.
You said that, so these are polystrate fossils, right? Horizontal layers cutting through, the tree trunks are, right. That video you showed us that was recorded with a toaster said, and you said, that layers form vertically, not horizontally. That video showed the layers going like this, right?
No.
Yes, it did. That video you showed, the layers were going this way, and then the guy said, this is the way they form, and they form laterally, not horizontally. And you said that multiple times.
Starting with a false premise, okay? He showed clearly that three layers were forming at the same time, and the bottom layer slightly ahead of the one above it. If you had three layers forming at the same time, it is very possible to have a fossil at the bottom that's younger and newer than a fossil at the top. Because now you got to go right and left to be able to determine, and you don't know which way the tide was going. Watch the whole video, Experiments in Stratification, done 40 or 50 years ago at the University of Colorado.
Okay.
He demonstrates sometimes they form 7 or 8 layers at the same time.
That's fine. Let me cut in here. You said multiple times the layers form laterally, not horizontally.
Correct.
That completely contradicts the idea of these polystrate fossils then, Kent, because these layers formed horizontally, not laterally. And you show us pictures of trees floating in Spirit Lake upright as if to suggest that they sink down into the sediment, and that's how they get filled, and that's how there are all of these layers surrounding the trees. But you're telling us that the layers form laterally. You just...
Correct.
You did a better job of debunking yourself than I ever could have.
Well, then you are completely not understanding the common English here. If a tree is standing still, a large tree is standing up, layers form around it.
But according to your video, they form laterally. These layers are formed horizontally.
The layers are now horizontal on top of each other, turned to rock. But when they formed, the tide was moving back and forth, forming each layer. A tree could stand there for 6 months while layers form around it, but it can't stand there for millions of years. Do you believe these layers
That's not the question. The question is, in what sequence are the layers put down and what orientation? I don't want to waste too much time on this because I didn't prepare this. I just heard you say it. But everybody, you can go back and show that his video is showing that layers are deposited laterally, which is completely different than his claim about how these polystrate fossils are formed. So I think that just is an odd contradiction. Sorry, I'm gotta reshare my screen here.
Is this discussion time? Do I get to respond to these, Donnie?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's Kent. Feel free to respond to his point there.
If a tree is stuck standing up, which most of them are in the world, and the water is rushing sideways, it may form 3 or 4 layers, and it may bury another tree downstream 10 feet later than that, or earlier than that. If the layers form this way, when they dry out, they end up this way, stacked up like a deck of cards. But if you shuffle a deck of cards, the top card isn't younger. All the layers, every speck of dirt's the same age.
This is not my question.
Okay. What he showed there, suppose in that experiment that he showed with the layers forming sideways, suppose there'd been something stuck in the bottom of the tank, sticking straight up. It would end up with layers, horizontal layers, that form vertically. How can you not get this?
So, like I said, I don't want to really spend time going over this. I don't want to waste, because I didn't prepare for this. But everybody can go back and watch this later. He's telling us that they form laterally, but they need to form horizontally for these polystrate fossils, because he's telling us that the tree is sitting vertically. So anyways, it's not super important. There was one other thing you said, though, that I thought was incredible. You said that, are you made of atoms, Kent?
I am. As far as I know, nobody's ever actually seen an atom, but yeah, that's the current theory.
True, but we have scientific models for them.
Oh, we have a model, then it's got to be true. Yeah, okay.
Are the atoms that made you up, did they exist in the universe before you were born?
Yes, they did.
Okay, and you think the universe is 6,000 years old?
Correct.
Are you 6,000 years old?
No, the material for the whole Earth is 6,000 years old.
Are you 6,000 years old, though?
No, it's been rearranging itself all along.
So
people die and get recycled.
If matter rearranges itself, then rearrangements of that matter can be different ages than the overall age of the material. See, in Kent's opening statement, he wanted to tell you that all the rocks and atoms on Earth have to be billions of years old, therefore we can't even date anything. That's obviously false. So I just wanted to get that out. Okay.
Well, before you slap and run, okay, it's true. Every speck of dirt's the same age. Are you saying these layers of rock in the imaginary geologic column, the top one is younger because it was placed there later? Does moving it to a new location change the age of it?
Write that down for your cross-examination. I'm asking questions right now.
I'm trying to answer them.
We can't answer questions with questions, though.
You are claiming the Holocene layer on top is younger than the Cambrian layer at the bottom. I'm trying to figure out how you could come to that conclusion when all the layers of dirt are the same age. There is no geologic column. That's what I started off my thing with.
They're not. We'll go over how to date them.
They have to be. Okay, go ahead.
So introduction first, science in action. So the way science works is we begin with a hypothesis, such as I think John stole the cookies from the cookie jar. Then you collect evidence, and we have some pretty damning evidence on Johnny here. Now, there's zero evidence that Sally did it. So are there any conclusions we can make from this? Kent, what would you conclude?
Oh, I'd give Johnny a chance to testify, maybe do a lie detector test. We're not in court here, Eric.
Sure, but if Johnny lies, the evidence will reveal that Johnny is lying.
He might have got cookies from somewhere else. There's lots of other options besides he stole them from that cookie jar, Your Honor.
Sure. So, if something happened in the past, there may be predictable evidence that supports a claim. Evidence can get destroyed. That is the cruel reality of time. But in any case, what you need to make sure you do is state your claim before you find evidence. If somebody thinks Sally did it, but they have no evidence, then their claim is not supported. And their claim remains unsupported until they find new evidence or discover a contradiction. The claim that Sally could have framed John isn't evidence, and it's not equal to the alternative. I bring that up because of what I discussed in my opening statement. So,
okay, well, hold it. You don't think Sally could wash her hands and get the crumbs off and still be guilty?
Yeah, but there's no evidence that Sally did it. There is evidence that Johnny did it.
There's evidence Johnny has crumbs on his hands. That's all. It's not evidence that he stole the cookies.
But if he stole the... Kent, if Johnny stole the cookies, then that is evidence that would count against or toward Johnny. So, anyways, we're not here to debate cookies, but
I'm wondering how you got to that from geologic column. Okay.
It's just to outline how science works and how you actually need evidence if you're going to argue against a claim. So
I showed you evidence. Petrified trees standing up show clearly the layers are not millions of years different in age.
That's not how you tell how old something is. Anyways, so here's a scientific hypothesis. A fish with rudimentary limbs, a shoulder, neck, all these features should be found in strata that has consistently been dated to a certain age and is of a certain type. That was a hypothesis of evolution, but the fossil record goes along with geology and the geologic column because an ancient Earth would posit that life has undergone changes on that Earth. Well, lo and behold, some scientists, Neil Shubin in particular and some others, knew of a place they could go, knew of a rock strata that they could go study that had been dated to a specific age. They found all kinds of fossils in there. None of them were land-dwelling vertebrates, and they found exactly the kind of thing they were looking for, the Tiktaalik fossil, which, if you study its anatomy, you can see it has all of those transitionary type traits that you would expect the ancestor of land-dwelling vertebrates to have. Evolution, Darwin actually called it descent with modification, and we can see that kind of thing happening here. So, multiple specimens were found where they thought they would be found. It has the traits that you would expect it to have. The strata contains no terrestrial vertebrates. So, Kent, where's the contradiction in this?
First of all, I think I heard the number recently that 99% of all fossils that are found are not terrestrial. Only 1% of all the fossils, it was just in something last week somebody sent me, they're saying nearly all the fossils are sea-dwelling creatures, 99, high 90s percentile. So the fact that you find Tiktaaliks in the same layer might prove they have the same body density. It might prove they all drowned at the same time.
I didn't ask what might be an alternative explanation. I asked where's the contradiction.
The contradiction to what? They found Tiktaalik fossils.
They found exactly what they thought they would find, where they expected to find it. So where's the contradiction?
When they drilled a well on our property, they thought if they drilled down, they would find water, and they found it. That's proof it's billions of years old.
So you can't find a contradiction.
I don't understand how this ties into anything that we're supposed to be covering tonight. So if I said the fact that the layers of the earth probably, I think they formed in one big flood, and you may find all the animals of a similar body density would drown at the same time. I bet you'll find clams are generally found at the bottom because clams already live at the bottom. That's be the first one buried, not because they evolved first. I would predict you would find birds generally in the top layers, because birds have hollow feathers and hollow bones. They float, and they're the last ones to die in a flood.
That's not a prediction. We already knew those things.
That's why they're found on top.
That's not a prediction.
Okay,
and aren't clams famously found on top of Mount Everest?
Well, we don't know that the top Mount Everest now has always been the highest point in the world. This again.
So these aren't predictions, audience. These are, we already knew that birds were on top of the clam, appear after the clam fossils, and Kent's saying that he predicted that's what we should find, which is not the case.
You said birds appear after? So you're saying the birds evolved, were there no birds around when clams were around?
That is correct.
There's birds and clams alive today. Go to the beach.
Birds appeared after clams.
No, I'm telling you, listen, if you go
I didn't
to
say
the
they
beach,
never coexisted.
You will find clams existing today and birds existing today.
Yeah, duh. Clams evolved first.
No, do you think it could have been that 50 years ago? Do you think clams and birds lived at the same time 50 years ago, 500 years ago, 10,000 years ago, 2 billion years ago?
No, not 2 billion years ago.
His claim is silly.
Kent was unable to find a contradiction, but we'll see if he can find. Well, you didn't. The hypothesis was this is what we should find, where we should find it. We did, and you can't poke any holes in it. You started talking about birds and clams. So I'll do you a favor and move on. Oil companies do, they have a similar kind of hypothesis. Oil deposits should be found in strata that's been consistently dated to this age and of this type. Using that assumption, they have more than quintupled the amount of known oil deposits just in the last 60 years. I think I have a picture of this right here. So these are just like known oil deposits. Hilariously enough, there actually was a group that tried to do what Kent does, Zion Oil and Gas. You can read these quotes, but they say, there is an answer, and it's found in the most overlooked source of geologic information available to mankind today, the Bible. So people using a biblical model to try to look for where oil might be went broke. This doesn't work. Using the secular model is wildly successful. This company, they've lost 99.68% of their stock, so that obviously doesn't work. So oil companies use these same working assumptions on Earth is old and the oil should be in these layers, and they find the oil in those layers. So Kent, where's the contradiction here?
Well, first place, oil companies go broke all the time. Okay, that's nothing to do with anything. And the fact that these guys made a prediction based on some Bible verse, I don't know the story. But the fact is, why do we have oil in the earth at all? I think the oil in the earth is clear evidence of rapid burial of lots of living material. I think almost everybody would agree oil is from organic material.
I didn't ask for an alternative explanation. I asked, can you find holes in the secular model?
Where did you go off on this wild idea of finding contradictions? Where is the evidence?
Because that's how you would prove it's false. We're not here to debate, did the flood happen? The topic of the debate is, does the geologic column exist? You think it doesn't, which means you need to prove that there are errors in the science that has built up the geologic column concept.
In the last 40 minutes, you have several times said this layer has been dated. This layer has been dated. They found this where the age it was supposed to be, stuff like that. Here's from American Journal of Science. The intelligent layman has long suspected circular reasoning in the use of rocks to date fossils and fossils to date rocks. The geologist has never bothered to think of a good reply, feeling the explanations are not worth the trouble as long as the work brings results. They're arguing in a circle. The age of the rocks is determined by the organisms it contains. The age of the fossils are determined by the rock layers. They date the rocks by the layers and the layers by the rocks. This is the clear contradiction in all of you said tonight. You're starting with the assumption that your stupid geologic column is true. It is.
No, it's not. Claiming that the logic is fallacious is not proof that there's a contradiction. Because here's the thing about logical fallacies. People think that if you commit a logical fallacy, you are wrong. That's not how it works. It's just bad logic. But go on.
Would you agree that in your geologic column that you're supposed to be supporting tonight, they have...
Save this for your cross-examination. You're not asking me questions right now.
Here they have trilobites at the bottom in the Cambrian and Ordovician era. Trilobites. This is... How do you know... If you find
you have to save this for your cross-examination. I'm not trying to be rude.
Yeah, guys, let's get back. So let's consider that a response from Kent, and then Eric either respond to that or follow up with a question. Go ahead.
I have my response data in a different place in here, so I will answer that specific question, Kent.
No worries. I've got your slide back up, Eric.
Thank you very much for that. So Kent, do you have... Where should we expect to find oil deposits if they were created by a global flood that created virtually every sedimentary layer on Earth? I know he said we weren't discussing the flood, but might as well throw it in there a couple times.
I predict that probably 100% of the oil deposits will be found underground.
No, duh. That would be the case regardless of whether your account is correct or my account is correct. Do you have evidence that would be exclusionary to your idea?
Well, your idea is that oil deposits are covered by layers of sediment that are a different age. How did they become a different age to be on top of these oil deposits?
Save it for your cross-examination. Do you have an answer?
I don't understand what you're reasoning here.
I'm proving that your model can't answer any questions and that you're just doing post hoc rationalization on everything.
The flood model would perfectly explain all the layers forming rapidly while the animals just recently died.
Then explain where we would find oil.
I told you, in the ground. I lived in East Texas. They have oil.
You don't understand that would be true regardless of if the Earth is billions of years old or thousands of years old?
You're not getting it.
Yes, I do.
I answered your question. Oil is found in the ground.
So what's the model that predicts that oil would be found in the sky?
There isn't any that I know of.
Okay, there we go. So a non-answer.
The fact that oil is found in certain pockets of the world, that would be wildly spread out. Who knows? I believe the global flood would cause all kinds of animals. In the middle of the Pacific Ocean today and in the Atlantic Ocean, there are huge islands of trash. The people are dumping plastic and stuff out there, and the Coriolis effect of the currents is causing all this to come together in one location, bigger than some of our states in the United States, mountains of trash. That's because of the swirling waters of the ocean. During the flood of Noah, the same swirling waters would tend to get animals to swirl together and be buried in pockets. I don't know where they were buried. I think you'd ask anybody in the oil field business, there's a whole lot of risk. You don't know. You drill a hole and hope you hit it. But if they find one, they're probably going to find more. Kilgore, Texas, the Kilgore Oil Museum, they had 28 oil wells on 1 acre of ground. There was so much oil down there back in 1920s, they couldn't pump it out fast enough. Probably that was where the center of one of these pockets were for all the dead animals that drowned. But in a worldwide flood, this could happen on the North Pole. It could happen anywhere. So the fact that it's found in the ground, as far as where it's found, I don't think you can do all kinds of things. You can do check earthquake monitoring and, do seismographs and stuff like that and try to calculate is the movement going through oil, through liquid or through solid. There's a lot of science behind finding oil, but that has nothing to do with the geologic column. Nothing whatsoever.
Okay. That is a damning non-answer, but moving on. So here's the so-called geologic column. Now, Kent doesn't believe in the geologic column, but the geologic column was described hundreds of years ago. The names were given to it hundreds of years ago. Now, what scientists, paleontologists, geologists at the time recognized was the only thing they could do at that time was what's called relative dating. They put things in the order they occurred, not when they occurred. They didn't have the technology for that. Whether you believe in a flood or what I believe in, it still, one thing happens after another. It's still a sequence. So we also get from this the principle of fossil succession. Some fossils, organisms, have coexisted with other organisms, but others have never coexisted. Dinosaurs and woolly mammoths have never coexisted. Trilobites and dinosaurs never coexisted, because that's what the evidence says. And then, or at least that was the hypothesis after taking a look at the fossil record. Then along came technology that we could use to date, to put ages on these fossils in different places. So paleontologists noticed that fossils don't overlap. Most of them don't. They inferred that vast stretches of time where life and environments were different, all they knew was the order, not the time span. Then scientists found a way to date materials. So if those prior assumptions are false, if this geologic column and the principle of fossil succession is false, then radiometric dating would disprove it. Now, Kent might say that radiometric dating itself is false or something like that, but if that's the case, then there would be no correlation. Except that's not what happened. All of the dates are consistent with what was assumed in the relative sequence of them. No trilobite fossil has ever been dated to be younger than dinosaur fossils or of the same age, and so on with all the other claims. So, Kent, where's the contradiction?
Well, how many fossils supposedly dated by your geologic column have turned out to be still alive? Is the Tiktaalik or something similar to that still alive?
Is the Loch Ness Monster still alive? Are we going there?
You're avoiding the question, sir.
No, I'm not.
Are there lobe-finned fish that are still alive today?
There are coelacanths, yeah. The coelacanths in the fossil record are completely different species of coelacanth.
Okay. So there are lobe-finned fish in your imaginary fossil record, and there are lobe-finned fish alive today. Are there mammoths in the imaginary fossil record? Yes. Could it be that they were just hunted to extinction in the last 1,000 years? There's sure a lot of evidence of carvings and stuff on cave paintings where people saw them alive. They didn't dig up the tusk and make a woolly mammoth out of a tusk. There's evidence that man has lived with mammoths. So
yeah, I know
the
that.
evidence is, the contradiction is clear. You're starting with the assumption your geologic column is true.
That's not a contradiction.
It's an assumption.
How is it a contradiction to make an assumption? You can't do science without a hypothesis, which is an assumption.
I have a hypothesis that the flood made all these layers in 1 year.
You have no
You have
evidence.
a hypothesis that the layers are different ages, and I'm asking you, if they're different ages, where are they coming from? Are they coming from outer space?
You're not cross-examining me, Kent. So
where's
the contradiction? It's not your turn to ask questions. I don't know how you don't get that. I'm going to answer all your questions.
Okay, guys, I just want to make sure we're sticking to the format. Yep. Note that question down, and we'll get to it in your 25-minute period, Kent. And Eric, I just want to double check how much time you have left, just so we're
probably not much.
Smoothly. You've got about 2 minutes left. So,
Kent, these are scientific claims. Coal forms from the Carboniferous. Oh, sorry, I have to go backwards a little bit. So we have, if we look at a Spirit Lake, this is one of Kent's favorite places to argue for like this flood stuff. What you see here are trees. And when you zoom in, there are, this is hundreds of trees in a small area. And you zoom out, and then there's tens of thousands. You zoom way out, and there's maybe millions of trees in there. When the eruption happened, it blasted trees away, and the blast also extended up the opposite mountainside, and then water and pyroclastic flow and all this other stuff ripped all the topsoil and left it bare, like you can see here. Then all that stuff ended up in Spirit Lake. There was so much sediment in Spirit Lake that the lake rose up. It was either 90 feet or 90 meters. I don't remember off the top of my head. So we have hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of trees. We have billions of tons of sediment. We have lots and lots of water. And we have far more than enough time, according to Kent, to form coal. Because Kent thinks coal was formed during a flood that only lasted a year. Yet there is no coal at all that's ever been found in that area. So clearly the requirements for producing coal are not as simple as a lot of trees, a lot of sediment, and a lot of water. The conditions are more rare than that. If we just look at the numbers, we used like 8.5 billion tons of coal in 2023. And other studies have looked at the biosphere to see how much biomass there is. So we have around 450 billion tons of carbon in the plant biosphere. So if every single plant on Earth today turned into coal, we'd have less than 100 years worth of this stuff. Now, is coal becoming scarce? No. There are over 1 trillion tons of proven reserves of coal. We find more of this stuff every year. So anyways, these are the scientific assumptions that date way back. Most coal comes from the Carboniferous period. That's why it was called that back in the 1800s. And coal forms under rare conditions. The coal collected for a period of many tens of millions of years. So the coal in Earth should represent prolonged accumulation, not sudden accumulation. And there's well over twice the amount of known coal, but we find more every year, as the Earth could make if every single plant turned into coal. But we know that even if there was a global flood, that wouldn't have happened. So in reality, there's thousands or tens of thousands of times more. Where's the issue in the secular model here for coal?
Well, the issue is really obvious. Okay, first place, the trees that you showed on Spirit Lake are floating on top of the water. They've done lab experiments where they make coal in 20 minutes if you bury it and put it under pressure. If those trees on Spirit Lake, see, logs float, Eric, when they're in the water, okay? But during Noah's flood, you would get multiple layers, and if you had 5,000 feet of mud on top of those logs, they would turn to coal quickly. The other great flaw in your model is you're looking at today's world, which is 70% underwater, and much 10% desert and 10% ice cap, okay? There's a relatively small amount of area for trees to even grow. 70% of the Earth is underwater. Suppose the world was at one time 90% land and did not have giant ice caps or giant desert. Suppose it was created perfectly to support life all over the place. Then you could get all the coal we find in the world in one flood. So your argument that today's model of the Earth, which only has 20, probably let's pick a number and say 10% of the Earth is able to even grow trees. Sure, it's a lot of forest. I live in a gravel pit here. We got thousands of trees here, pine trees. This is a tree area where they raise them for paper mills. But you're looking at today's world and saying that's how it's always been. What if the Earth was 90% land and 10% water at one time? I think there's overwhelming evidence. The fact that we find a lot of coal in the ground, more coal than can be produced today, is not proof that your model is correct.
It certainly is proof that your model is false. You didn't even try to find issues with the secular model. You said, what if something else? You didn't even try. Okay. And then you talk about Spirit Lake, the trees are floating. What would happen if the whole earth was flooded? The trees would float. You say they would have been buried because there's sediment. There was the side of the mountain blew off, Kent, and all of the topsoil from the area was gone. Billions of tons of sediment. All the water you need, millions of trees, zero coal.
Because they're still floating on top. If they were buried under 500 or 2,000.
50 years, or what, 40-something years. And you're telling us in 1 year you can get coal this way. Whereas we have the conditions exactly like what you're saying are required to produce coal, it produces zero coal.
Because they're not on the bottom of the mud yet. If
exactly.
They were covered, they would be.
And a flood wouldn't put them on the bottom of the ocean.
Eric, I showed clearly the error in your model. You're assuming, just like predicted in 2 Peter 3, that the scoffers would be willingly ignorant of the flood. The layers of the earth forming sideways could bury the trees, every tide would add a new layer. By the time you get a few hundred or a few thousand feet of mud on top, the pressure is going to turn it to coal. Google, how fast can coal form? You'll find it's been done in the laboratory in 20 minutes. Heat and pressure is required. The trees on top of Spirit Lake are not under any heat or pressure.
Gentlemen,
a flood. So the ocean levels could not have been thousands of feet deep or anything like that. So the idea that at the surface of the earth enough heat and pressure would have been caused by water to make coal is pretty laughable.